Trauma Therapist Podcast Plus listeners can listen to episodes early and ad-free right now. Become a Plus listener by going to Apple Podcasts, searching for the Trauma Therapist Podcast, and signing up today. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast, a show about the incredible people dedicated to helping those who've experienced trauma. My name is Guy McPherson, and my mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to inspire each of us to help those around us. You ready?
All right. Yeah.
All right. Here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Akilah Riley-Richardson. Akilah, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. So Akilah is a published researcher, relational healing facilitator, couples therapist, and certified clinical trauma professional. She's been in clinical practice for 16 years and has experience working with couples and persons practicing consensual non-monogamy, both in the Caribbean and internationally. She also specializes in work with sexual and racial minorities, and she is the founder of the BIPOC Relational Healing Institute and creator of the P.R.I.D.E model, that's P.R.I.D.E model, and she strives for authenticity, alignment, attunement, and abundance. Akilah, welcome.
Hi, thank you. Thank you. So good to be here.
Appreciate that. So before we get going, share with the listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I am from the Twin Island state of Trinidad and Tobago. Yeah, and I'm still here in Trinidad and Tobago. So even though I'm here, I'm often traveling or I'm often doing work internationally in other ways. So yeah, I'm stationed here, but I'm working in various parts of the globe. Yeah.
So I got to tell you, I was first introduced to you by a workshop that you did through the Academy of Therapy Wisdom, which I, in all transparency, is a sponsor of this podcast, and I facilitate their integration calls. And I watched your workshop you did there, and I was blown away.
Oh.
I was blown away by you. You are intense in the best possible way. And I'll tell you, I'm not BSing you. I'll tell you, I was really struck by you as part, just to give our listeners and viewers some context, as part of this workshop you presented, you showed clips of some work you did. And the way you were listening and holding, like, just present, and then how you then commented and how that then opened up these discussions and feeling was amazing. So let me just open by saying that, and I'm really excited to meet you and have you on here.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
You're welcome. So how did this work start for you?
How did this work start for me? I would say that for many years, even when I was in grad school, I was just always concerned about the ways in which the systems around people, shape their realities, and wanting to be fully present with that. Yeah, in the therapeutic space and in other spaces as well. And so the work for me started with a real interest in how do I support people in recognizing the wider system, how it shapes their reality, how do I validate in a real way, not in a performative way, but how do I show up fully and validate people's adaptations and the skills people use to survive systemic trauma. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And I think me occupying a Black Global South identity, positions me in a way to understand certain things through lived experiences as well. Understanding what it means to be Global South, to not be seen, to not be valued in the wider global space, and wanting to kind of create that for clients from all over the world. Yeah, so the work for me, I would say, started with this passion for understanding and being with clients in a particular way, and also just kind of my own bodily experience of what it means to occupy this particular body. Yeah.
when you decided you wanted to become a therapist, did you go to school in your country?
Yeah, yeah,
You did.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah. I did my BSc in psychology, then I did my master's in clinical social work. And subsequent to that, I just did a lot of training in various modalities from various parts. Like all these courses and stuff, I was doing a lot of courses, which have been insanely helpful to me. I would say a big piece for me has been understanding just the neurobiology of trauma and understanding what people were walking in with. So I was able to blend that understanding of the neurobiology of trauma with some of my own training in social work and clinical social work, and being able to be with those two pieces while in the therapy room. But yes, my training is primarily in Trinidad and Tobago. Even though I would say, well, you're trained in Trinidad and Tobago, but you're kind of trained in the US because, I mean, being in the global South education system, there's a heavy reliance on US based and European epistemology, which has its own challenges. Yeah. Um, so a lot of it came in that way for me.
Did the fact that you studied within that space, within that culture, how did that impact the work you do and your perspective?
Yeah, I'll say so. That's an interesting question because, like I said, though I'm trained here, there's a heavy reliance on the US curriculum. And I would say that that for me was always the rub a little bit because here I am in this Caribbean space and this global South space, but having to study a very colonial curriculum. Yeah. And a curriculum which suggested so much imperialism, intellectual imperialism. So that was always a rub for me. And I want to say that that largely informed that rub, that discontent, that frustration largely informed and informs how I work even now. Yeah. Because I'm recognizing that so many of the modalities that we work with don't necessarily sit in the realities of our clients. Because even within the US, so many of the modalities are white, heterosexual, kind of that's the kind of essence or the ethos of the modality. So being in this space and having to deal with that rub always pushed me to want to work in a way that was so grounded. Yeah, with who's sitting in the room in front of me. So if you're BIPOC or if you're LGBTQ, I'm always thinking about the fact that often models that we have been trained in as therapists don't necessarily sit in your reality. And so then how do I walk in with you in a more grounded space? And how do we co-create the reality, co-create the work? Yeah, so a huge part of my work, as you may have seen from the Academy of Therapy Wisdom, is how do I co-create therapy with my clients? Yeah, not just co-creating goals, co-create therapy itself, moving very slowly, asking the client, what do you think the next move should be? What do you need from me here? And us rumbling with the ways in which white-based global North psychotherapy is not always in the best interest of marginalized people from all over the world, including the US. Yeah. So I'm saying that being here and having to deal with that, with being perpetually dislocated, even in my own system, meaning that my reality was not showing up in the curriculum, that I think was a rub that kind of pushed me to want to work the way that I work, if that makes sense.
That it does. And I think it's amazing. And it is one of the things, this idea of co-creating the therapy really kind of struck me and inspired me. And I think it's something that sounds great, but it ain't easy, right? And even this challenging of this colonial type therapy that is present here within the West. Just questioning that to me demands a certain owning of who you are. Where did that come from for you? Because the work you do and the way you do, and correct me if I'm wrong, it involves being an honoring of who you are, and which involves being willing to look at and explore who you are. Where did all
Yes.
that come from?
Yeah. I want to say, and if I haven't answered your question, please feel free to bring it back. I want to say that piece around owning who you are, I think it's really difficult for BIPOC in particular, because so much of the essence of who we are has been displaced through colonialism and racism. Yeah. So even when I, as a therapist, am trying to walk more in alignment with who I am, and I'm inviting a client to do same, I'm recognizing that we need to grieve that so much has been lost. Yeah. Because of colonialism, because of racism, and the fact that, truth be told, just like surviving in these spaces require you to not live in your own truth. So I want to just say, being in community or being in therapy and trying to own who you are and locating that can feel so hard and so difficult and so painful. For me, what I've tried to do in my work is recognize the grief of that. And I'm doing a lot more reading now. Yeah, in terms of Indigenous ways of working. Yeah, or how Indigenous people understand healing. I'm thinking about African cultures, Aboriginal cultures, etc. I'm trying to understand more of how people understand self. Yeah, how people understand healing, and if I can walk in with what does self constitute, or what does healing constitute? What does it mean to be alive? Like when you walk into those various epistemologies or ways of knowing the world, you'd be surprised at the ways in which they can steer us differently in terms of the therapeutic moves that we make. With that said, I'm also mindful of the fact that the reading I'm doing and that kind of experience may not be one that my clients are coming in with.
Mm-hmm.
So the owning in that regard for them starts with a place of understanding that there are things that you're experiencing in your body that you think that are really just the impact of colonization and the impact of racism and the impact of homophobia and the impact of transphobia. And can I be with you where you can connect to who you are through a somatic experience? So a lot of what I do is trying to work through the body. I'll say a few things about that. Working through the body is not an Akilah creation. Yeah. It isn't even the creation of so many people now who present it as their thing. I mean, we've been working with the body for centuries now. Indigenous people have been working with the body. Yeah. So I want to say we are tapping into some old wisdom here that we are bringing forward into this new space, right? So we're working through the body and doing that work there and helping people to connect with that. It can feel scary at times for people to work through the body. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But we're facilitating that. And as we facilitate that, there's a thing I often ask clients, and you may not have seen this in the work I did with Therapy Wisdom, but I've started asking clients and clinicians, because I also train clinicians in how to do their own interrogation. But as you track your body, ask yourselves, is there a part of me that wants to do something very differently from what I know or from what I've been taught? So I call that the fugitive knowing. Yeah, there's a fugitive knowing in your body, a part of you that is saying, I don't want to do this. Yeah. And I like to walk into that fugitive knowing. I like to discover, because sometimes that is a space of true liberation. You know, in pretty soon, at the risk of sounding like I'm advertising, pretty soon Therapy Wisdom will be doing a course with Bayo Akomolafe, and he talks a lot about onto fugitivity. And so I'm leading a little bit here on bio stuff about onto fugitivity, and I'm building that into the therapy process with helping clients and clinicians to engage with their bodies in a way where they're locating what they move to do, but also the parts of their bodies that are saying, I want to try something different. I feel there's another energy here. And let's discover in that fugitive part if there is some wisdom, some untapped wisdom that you have been suppressing because you've been abiding by just traditional understandings of psychotherapy.
Yeah. I mean, that just feels to me so profound and so kind of elemental to be even working in that way. It feels to me like, I wonder if you can give us an example. Do people come into you with, you know, I have anxiety or I have depression, not even realizing the systemic forces that they've been roiling in?
Oh God, yeah. I was working with a client just this week. The client said that they saw a therapist years ago and they were in their teenage years and they were told that they have emotional repression. And I remember saying, of course you're repressed. This makes complete sense. So I want to say that I do a lot of validation, yeah? That and connect what I did in the moment, I call it responsible externalizing, where we connect the symptom to the structures around people. Yeah. And I say, yeah, this thing that you're feeling, it makes complete sense given the systems that you occupy. And I'm thinking of another case that I was working with where we located the symptom in the body and we were asking the symptom, what should the therapist do next? What should be the move next? Like I wanted the symptom to tell me. There's a way in which I want to, I don't want to call it symptom worship. Maybe it is, but I want to value the symptom. I want to have the symptom tell us what's the next move. A part of this I want to say, so though I am Caribbean, I've been raised in a primarily post-colonial space that does not really cherish or value African knowledge because of the impact of colonialism. But I want to say that there's a lot of wisdom here that I lean on from African traditions, especially Ifa tradition, which has come from Yoruba people. So a lot of us who live in Trinidad and Tobago, as some of our sisters and brothers in the US would have come from the Yoruba tribe. Yeah. And in Ifa, there's an understanding of something that the body has a connection with the world and that we're sensing the world through our bodies. That's why I said that the somatic work is not new. Yeah. We've been doing this for a long time. So when I'm working through the body, I'm thinking about the fact that what this person is experiencing is giving me information about how they're contacting the earth and the stories there. And I want to sit at the feet of the symptom. Yeah. And I want the symptom to tell me what is necessary. I want to say this as well, that in Ifa tradition, there's also the understanding that each person has their own Ori, O-R-I. Yeah. And your Ori is like your head, your purpose, your true essence, what you've come here for. So when I'm thinking about how I'm working with people, I'm thinking about the fact that this person has a path that, predates even this moment here with me, and I have to honor that. And if I want to map that onto contemporary understandings of neurobiology, I'm thinking about this person's prefrontal cortex, and the fact that I see the two as being aligned, and therefore I'm bringing their essence into relationship with the symptoms in their body, allowing their essence to witness those symptoms and asking their symptoms, what is needed here in therapy. So going back to just the example, working with this woman who just was experiencing so much double consciousness and feeling just really icky in her body for being Black in the US, and us connecting to the symptom, where does it live in the body, tracking it and asking the symptom, what should we do next? And we moved very, very slowly. One of the things I've had to value is moving slow, which is interesting because I myself have battles with anxiety and often feel the need to want to go fast. So I in those moments, I go very, very slow. I honor the symptom and it emerges. It might sound really airy-fairy, but we often get an answer. And sometimes the answer isn't something that somebody can vocalize. Sometimes it's an image or another twitch in the body, some sensation, and I'm trusting the body. And I want to say this, guy, for me, doing this work is extremely political. And I want to say the clinical is always political. When we're in therapy, we are always privileging one way of knowing the world or displacing another. There is no therapeutic work that is apolitical. And I think as a Black woman, especially from this part of the world, when I'm working with persons who are marginalized, it is my business to ensure that they connect to their bodies in this way, because so often BIPOC bodies are the subject of violence, they're brutalized, they're policed. And if we think about our LGBTQI brothers and sisters, and not to play into binary, but our LGBTQI community members, like I'm thinking just the ways in which their bodies and their essences are policed. And so when I'm working with persons in the room, I am creating a space for the body or to be experienced differently, for people to be with their bodies in a way that is non-policing, that's liberating, that's emancipatory.
Did this way of working just come naturally for you, or did it come as a result of some trauma or some realization of the systemic oppression that you experienced?
I think it came from, maybe transparent, from since I was in doing as an undergrad student, I always had a preoccupation with justice. In fact, I really think.
What is that?
I don't know. This is interesting. This is like a lighter. So
Okay.
maybe this is some piece of information that I'm learning. But I noticed this in undergrad. I had a preoccupation with justice. So I'm inclined to believe, if I'm leaning on Ifa tradition, that maybe this is part of why I'm here, that there's this understanding of who I am to be in the world. Yeah. And this thing was chosen for me. I've always been this. And then I think over time, studying social work, being exposed to other colleagues and peers who are the same kind of essence. Yeah. Living in a Black body in the global South where, yes, it's a predominantly Black space, but you're living in whiteness because the white way of being in the world occupies so much of our university systems. And yes, we're living in white ways of knowing the world, though it's a lot of Black people here. Yeah. So that informed it as well. And I also think I want to give my nods where nods are due. I have done some training in SC, somatic experiencing. I've done some training in the work of Julianne Taylor Shaw. I've done training in different spaces. So when I map what I have wanted on some of these things here, it was unfolding for me. I think the piece about co-creating therapy is a piece that I have stuck in, which is largely tied to my feeling that this stuff that I was learning in grad school and in undergrad really was not, it's somebody else's agenda. It's somebody else's voice. I mean, psychotherapy has so many beautiful elements. I don't ever want to discredit psychotherapy largely, but there's a way in which there's so much politics in psychotherapy in terms of what gets platformed and what doesn't get platformed. What clients believe about themselves, what clients don't believe about themselves. Interestingly, today I was working with another interviewer talking about anxiety, and I was talking about the political nature of the diagnosis. Yeah, that the symptoms of anxiety are very real, but pulling all those things together and calling it anxiety or anxiety disorder, that naming is political. Yeah, and automatically it disempowers some and privileges some. So it disempowers the person who's experiencing it, but it empowers the person who's stepping in to treat it. Yeah. And so this is why I want to sit at the feet of the symptom. Yeah, and worship it in some extent, but not worship it to the extent where we don't try to support people. So I'm not black and white. I'm not saying that I want to discard everything. I'm saying that there is room for another way of being with what we're seeing in people's lives. Yeah. There's room to name it differently. So yeah, that's kind of where I don't know if I answered your question, but that's
you did. Yeah. It's bringing up a lot, certainly. I mean, one of the things that's coming to my mind is as I'm putting myself in the position of the listeners here, there are so many workshops out there, so many modalities and trauma treatments, et cetera, et cetera. How does one, with what you're saying, how does one go about absorbing these, learning from these? it feels to me like it's almost a trap.
You know what I ask myself often? Not what is here, but what is not here. You know, what's on the periphery? And I remember beginning to think more about that when doing some work with Bayo Akomolafe. When I sit in these spaces and I see what's constantly sold to us, say, I know what's here, but what is not here? What ways of healing and treating trauma are not being showed or not being shared? And I don't know if I'd say it's a trap, but I would say, or maybe it's that's a very good. Now that I've said it, what concerns me is that as we push only certain ways of working with trauma, we then push only certain ways of understanding trauma, and we have not tapped into so much that exists. And there's a way in which, Guy, when we tap into stuff that's outside of the dominant treatments, we romanticize it. There's some Orientalism that feels very icky. Like I talk about the fact that one of the things that bugs me in so many conferences is that we'd have like a 3-day conference and there'd be 2.5 days of all of these, treatments, top treatments, and then an afternoon to handle DEI issues. As opposed to having something that's interwoven throughout, everything is political. And I think we have to accept that. All teaching, all moments, like even this moment we're having right here, you are doing something that's beautifully political. You are giving voice to a Black Caribbean Global South woman to speak about therapy. You are making a revolutionary move here, Guy. Yeah. And I'm celebrating that. And while you are doing that, we also have spaces that are only platforming white, cishet Americans and one way of knowing the world. And I think it's time for us to kind of move out of that a little bit and ask ourselves often in these spaces, what is not here?
Mm-hmm. Just remind everyone I'm speaking with Akilah Riley-Richardson. As we kind of wind down, this idea of co-creating therapy, to me feels very empowering. It feels very creative. It demands a self-trust on the part of the therapist, on the part of the process, on the part of the client, trusting themselves. What? I came here I'm paying you. Why are you asking me to talk a little bit more about that process and how you introduce it with the clients you work with?
So I'm so glad you raised that, because it is not a process that I can do with everybody. So I work with people, and the first thing I do, I ask people, how would you like me to work with you? What would you like? Yeah. And which for me feels like the first indication of me trusting them. Some people do want a more directive approach. Yeah. And in those instances, I also kind of support that. So I use this particular modality in spaces where people feel ready, people want to do this kind of work, and I honor persons who may not want that kind of work as well. Because I said, I'm trained in so many different things that I'm able to kind of move through different ways of being. But I think when I do this particular way of trying to encourage self-trust, I have to start by kind of helping people to understand how we've been taught not to trust ourselves, and that this particular way of working is about decolonial work, political therapy. All therapy is political anyway, but it's about really bringing that to the fore and highlighting that. So it's slow. It's not for everybody. Those who are willing to do it, I open the floor. But I am not, one of the things I'm always cautious about is that I don't want to oppress people in any kind of way. I also don't want to tell people that you must work this way. People have the right to choose what they're ready for. So if you don't want to work this way and you want to do EFT or something else, that's fine. That's okay. I think the most important thing is giving people the opportunity. And when I have loved co-creating therapy. It's been beautiful just seeing the decisions people make. And I have to know who would want to do that and who wouldn't.
Right. So what is on the horizon for you in terms of the work you do? You said you also work with therapists. In what
Yes.
capacity are you doing that?
Yeah, I do supervision, and there's this thing I do called ground learnings, where I work with therapists in being able to decolonize their practice, find the fugitive parts of their work, and like kind of get creative in their work and unlearning and creating new ways of work. That's a big thing for me. I'm not interested in therapists buying into any kind of Akilah worship and trying to get into my model. I know that's a big thing. Everybody wants to get into a model. I kind of want therapists to find their wisdom, and find their internal wisdom. So my work with therapists, and the other thing, I can't say much about it yet because I haven't signed the thing, but a book is on the way. So I'm very excited about that. Yeah, I'm just waiting to sign the thing.
Awesome.
But
Well, please come back whenever you want. I'd love to have you back here. It was awesome talking to you. I appreciate it. What's the best way for people to get in contact with you, Akilah?
yeah, definitely check out my website, AKilahRiley-Richardson.com. Feel free to subscribe. Also, you can shoot me an email at info@AKilahRiley-Richardson.com. Google me, I'm pretty easy to find. Yeah, and shoot me correspondence.
Okay. We'll have that linked up here at the show notes page at thetraumatherapistpodcast.com. Akilah, awesome. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye.